Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Can you hear me well? That's good news. So if you ever thought that the way in which the organizations you belong to request donations from you is a bit random or a bit out of the spectrum of what you would expect, wait until you hear this week's Torah portion. And the reason is because this week's Torah portion is called Parshat Truma. And this request for Truma, for donation, for contribution, comes literally out of nowhere. Let me explain what I mean. Last week's Torah portion, Parashat Mishpatim, ends with a beautiful description of a God, a divine presence that resides in nature. God's presence is illustrated as being in a mountain, in a cloud. Its glory is like a consuming fire on top of that mountain. And then literally in the next line, already in this week's Torah portion, we are called to make contributions for the sake of building a tabernacle that will hold that presence. It looks so nice that we want to put it in a box. The Torah tells us in Exodus 25:2, I want you to hear a little bit of the sound of the word truma, contribution. Daver el bnei Israel va'ikhu li truma, contribution. Tell the Israelite people to bring me contributions, gifts, truma. You shall accept contributions for me from every person whose heart is so moved. Now, the word truma, contribution, carries the word ram. The word ram means to elevate, to lift up. The classic interpretation is that, and believe me, this is a great spiel, a great speech for raising donations for the synagogue, so we might use it in the future. So remember this, to lift up, right? And so we say that the classic interpretation is that our contributions, our donations, and our enterprises elevate us. So yesterday, like many of you, I listened to an interview with Eli Sharabi, who was released from Hamas captivity after spending almost 500 days in the tunnels of Gaza. I was so moved hearing how the 4 captives that were held together helped and supported one another. But beyond that support and that camaraderie that they have for one another, I was stunned beyond belief by these men who just 10 days after returning from 500 days of captivity, torture, and starvation, to learn that his wife and his 2 daughters were murdered. He was sitting there and expressing words of gratitude for the family he had. And he was fully dedicated to the work for the return of the captives and the healing of the Israeli society that is pretty ill right now. I ask myself, how is it possible? How is he capable of not screaming in face of all these injustices? In Hebrew, the words ram, as it is in the word contribution, truma, and the word ra'am, thunder, are almost identical. They don't get me wrong, they don't spell the same, but they sound so close. What distinguishes between them is just a little nuance, just a little sound. I will say it just to make the noise, and you will not hear that. Le'arim, to lift up, and le'arim, to storm. Le'arim, to elevate, and le'arim, cannot even say that. Le'arim, which is, there's an I in the middle, which is kind of difficult to pronounce, which is to storm. They sound almost the same. And it is not just Eli, the one whose moving interview I had the chance to hear, but almost every single captive I have heard is in a place of making substantial contributions for a greater good. And once again, how is that possible? Why aren't they storming? Why they are not ro'amim? Listening to Eli at some point, it dawned on me. Those that have been in the lowest place, literally in the lowest place, in the tunnels of Gaza, but this is also true for those that have experienced suffering in general. You don't have to have the most traumatic experience in order to understand pain and suffering. All of them, all of us that have experienced suffering, know that screaming from that low place doesn't really help. Nobody really hears. And that there is something that does stand the chance of making a difference, and it's not our ability to scream loud, but actually to focus ourselves in what we want to build. And buildings, teach this Torah portion, are made by contributions. Instead of screaming, those that are in a very low place know that the way forward is by trumot, by making contributions. We are facing so many challenges. The ongoing war in Israel, the adjustment here in the United States to this new administration that is bringing a series of executive orders that are concerning and hurting already many of us. Add to that list today's development with Ukraine and the exchange of Twitters between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine. You name it. There are so many things. There are so many good reasons to scream. But Torah teaches that once you're out of that mountain, and that time, as we said at the beginning, when we spoke about God being in the mountain, remember? A couple of verses ago, that God was in that free, beautiful space. Once we are out of that mountain, the need of making contributions, the need of responding to difficult situations is pretty random. And that need challenge us to step beyond our real and legitimate feeling that we want to scream and show up with our best contributions. Our country, our people, our community, and our families need the best of us, particularly when we are feeling lonely, as many of us are feeling now. Professor Yeshayahu Leibovich, the great philosopher, points out that for the creation of the world, for the entire story of the creation of the world, the Torah dedicates 31 verses. For the creation of the tabernacle, of the society that we want to live in, the Torah dedicates more than 300 verses. It turns out that for God it's easier to build. Humans, we struggle with that a bit more. So I started by asking you about random solicitations for contributions. If you thought that it might be the tabernacle or the shul, well, we wish that from those places we would get, and don't get me wrong, make your best contributions for the shul. But if we thought that those are going to be the places that require from us the most, I think we are wrong. Our own lives are asking constantly for our best contributions. Life is constantly requiring our contributions. And so listening to Eli and thinking, the release hostage, listening to Eli and thinking about he's been through it's almost like there is this light bulb moment. And the question of why do people who have been through the wars still find ways to give back? How is it possible that the most generous are those that are heartbroken? The Torah gives an answer with the whole idea of the tabernacle. It spent a lot of time explaining how to build something sacred, something that could have just been a simple box. It's telling us that when life throws chaos at us, building something, giving instead of breaking down is the way to go. It is difficult, but it is also how we make a difference on our country, our people, our communities, our families. Need from us to show up with our best contributions. Because in making that difference is how we heal, not just ourselves, but everyone around us too. Shabbat Shalom Mevorach. We will continue.